This is the Prestigious Initiative, and these are the points. I'm Chris Kent, and I'm joining Chris Bean. Hello, Mr. Bean.
Hello, sir.
Let's talk about your conversation with Tess Jewel Larson. Any key takeaways or things that stick out to you right off the bat here?
I think the mindfulness in the breathing was such a good practice to have. And we're always breathing all the time, but very seldom are we actually inspecting how we're breathing and striving to breathe better or breathing for the state of being that you want. And so I think that is something that was a key takeaway for me for sure.
Absolutely. And I loved how something she emphasized in what she does and how she kind of coaches people through this mindfulness and breathing and some bits of yoga and things like that is she emphasizes connecting to all of your senses that are supporting us. And so, sometimes it's just taking a time to pause and realize what brings us joy by looking around or smelling or seeing or tasting or just feeling everything that's going on. And just taking that moment to kind of realign yourself with what's happening around you and what you're feeling and experiencing. And it brings me back to our conversation with Billy Lahr, talking about some of those similar type things. And it's great to see a parallel between those and how they're both kind of approaching it from this holistic, kind of well-rounded mindset when it comes to relaxation. Uh, and like you said, breathing, yoga, meditation, things like that. I can really relate with that because it's something we all do is experience the world in our five senses. And so being able to uh, force ourselves to pause and then intake the world in all those ways and be mindful and conscious and think about what we're intaking and receiving, I think is a huge um, step in the right direction toward increasing our mindfulness, awareness, and then appreciation for everything that's around us.
You said all the keywords except for the one that I always say, being present focused, being in the present moment, and that being able to see all those things you did, it will, to me, in my eyes, it brings me into the present moment so I can be present in whatever it is that's going on, whatever it is I'm doing at that time.
Obviously, reducing stress is very important. There's been proven studies, proven things, proven science. I don't know the right phrase to use right now, but it's proven that negative stress can cause a negative physical, um, negative loop of different.
Emotions?
I'm thinking of physically, so
Oh, okay.
affects
Tenseness
negative.
and
Yeah, she talked about how heart health can be reduced by constant stress.
hmm,
That negative stress loop can cause physical ailments. I don't know, negative physical effects, negative overthinking from when you're too stressed. And uh, the way to start being aware of that is to identify the signs, the warning signs that you're experiencing. It could be that physical tightness. It could be that reoccurring physical discomfort. It could be constantly overthinking. Uh, Identify those warning signs and then respond to them. Do something about them. This is where we kind of got into physical grounding. And so thinking about in your brain and feeling each finger individually, feeling your feet on the ground and feeling each part of your body and going through that in your mind, helping you to ground yourself, calm yourself down, slow those kind of racing thoughts and focus on expelling or getting rid of some of that stress and kind of realigning yourself and just calming down a little bit.
I think for that, the biggest thing was understanding that there's a roadmap, which means that I start from here, let's say where I am, and then I move to the next step and the next step and the next step all the way down. And if I have been down that road before, I should start to recognize some of the warning signs that lead me to where I was, where I did not want to be. And if I can see some of those warning signs, maybe I can detour or pause or jump to a different path so I don't end up to that place that I don't want to be. But part of that is being aware, being present so that you know what is likely happening so you can prevent it from happening any further.
Yes, sir. Tess referred to mindfulness as awareness with objectivity. And I really like that kind of description to that. And kind of moving forward from that, she talked about yoga. Yoga is awareness, but it's love connecting with breath and movement. Again, I think those are two great ways to kind of describe those two things that sometimes we don't really have an idea of what that could be, but I really like the way that she talks about those. We also got a little bit into somatic work or working on your mind-body connection, and then using mindfulness, yoga, meditation to rewrite your brain over past and old pain and kind of how your body will hold on to a lot of those things. And I know she mentioned in our conversation how she's had physical injury recently. It's kind of prevented her from doing a lot of things that she likes to do and loves to do, but she can still use yoga, mindfulness, meditation to kind of connect with all of that, to explore her mind-body connection, to work through old past pain and those kind of things through her mindfulness, the awareness with objectivity, through yoga and all those things. And it's great to hear that even when there are obstacles and things that might be holding you back from doing what you feel like you could do or should do or uh, you know uh, performing at your peak, so to speak, there's still ways that you can use this mindfulness, yoga, meditation to connect and to relax and to reduce, stress, stressors that are in your life.
I think the biggest takeaway for that was those three definitions. And it's so cool to hear from people that are experts in the field or well renowned in the field to give us their explanations, their definitions of what those words that they're meaning are. Because we all have different ideas of what yoga is or what mindfulness is. And so asking her, what's the definition of this? Let's clearly define what we're talking about. What does this mean in your terms? So that as we're talking and furthering that journey of conversation, we know what the words mean. And I think that's so important. And you're right. Those definitions were not what I intended or expected them to be because I had my own preconceived notions of what those things were. And it was very helpful to get a clear and concise, this is it. Oh, I have not thought about it like that before. And so I'm sure that some of you listeners perhaps were thinking about mindfulness as, whatever, but I think that her definition of mindfulness and yoga and somatic work were very helpful in understanding her journey that we were going on in that conversation. Yeah.
As part of all this, we mentioned mindful movement and exercise. Part of that being yoga, part of that being anything else that you can do to get active and be moving around, helping to release tension through blood flow. Exercise and mindful movement helps to, increase lung activity. It's important to maintain movement to support your long-term relaxation, and then also in these instances to build up gradually. You're not going to start doing yoga for 3 hours a day and doing all these complex, intense poses and stuff like that. You're not going to start running 15 miles a day. And these are extreme examples, of course, but the point is you start somewhere, do a little bit, and it'll work up and work up and work up. But the important thing is that you're doing something. We talked about, again, the mindful movement and exercise. You're not doing it just because you're told it's what you're supposed to do, but you're doing it to keep your body moving, help again with that muscle, um, releasing muscle tension, increasing blood flow, lung activity, things like that. All these things are going to help your body, which in turn, again, is going to help you kind of reduce or relieve some of that stress because you're being mindful about actually getting up and doing something and activating those things physically and biologically inside of our bodies that are important when we're dealing with stress and these kind of things.
And I think we talked about being mindful and kind of going slow, almost in hand, because you want to, excuse me, you want to still be able to do the movement, but not prevent yourself from being able to work or move the next day or the next week. Sorry, excuse me, I was choking on my air or something there. Um, you want to be mindful as you're starting these activities because you can't jump in and think, I'm going to do what that person is doing that's been here for, 6 months or 9 years or whatever it is. Be able to take it slow, play kind of the long game because you know the benefit that eventually someday you can be there, but not if you start and you go all in. You can't, like you said, you can't run 15 miles. It doesn't work that way.
And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier, we talked about breath and breath work. Our breath, as Tess said, tells us how we are in any moment. And getting when you find yourself in a position where maybe your breath is coming very fast, very quick, very ragged, and you can tell that's an indicator, as you mentioned earlier too, an indicator of your stress and the position that you might be in or the feelings you might be having. A couple different tips toward some breath work. We talked about getting your inhale to be the same as your exhale. We talked about, she mentioned rectangle breath versus square breathing. So, very often I feel like we're all heard of or talked about the square breathing where it's all the same and you do all four corners of the square in your mind as you're breathing or whatnot. But Tess is an advocate or mentioned the rectangle breath because sometimes they're not quite the same as you're working through your breathing. The inhale might not be the same. And it's part of working up to where you want to be and whatnot. And so being, kind of non-judgmental and taking it step by step when you're working with breathing and using breathing to help you out of these stressful situations or to deal with these kind of stressed feelings. She mentioned the strong ha breath where you just exhale, take a big breath like that. And then I know you guys had a little back and forth about um, the physiological sigh,
That's it,
the,
yes.
the double inhale, exhale kind of thing. And one thing I really like that she mentioned, because I do find myself doing this pretty often, and maybe this is why, or maybe it's just a coincidence. But she also talked about how humming can help to activate your lungs, and humming throughout the day or humming while you're doing something is really important and creating that whole mind-body connection. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know that had a bigger role than just making some noise when you're doing X, Y, or Z thing. But at the end of all of it, you know, we talked about developing a breath practice or ways to help you breathe better in all situations. But specifically, again, when you find yourself being stressed or overwhelmed, using that as a tool to help calm yourself down, to help ground yourself, and then relax in that situation so you can do what you need to do or make decisions that you need to make.
Yeah, breath work is so fascinating because, like I said, you're breathing all the time, but most of the time it's a background process. You're not even thinking about it. And she recommended doing a breath, like you were focused on breathing and how you breathe and how you interact with your breathing in the beginning of the day or the end of the day or both, or at some time just to have that, 5 minute, 2 minute, whatever the window is of you actually focusing on that. Because oftentimes you'll hear, oh, I should be breathing like this. Oh, maybe I should try this one. And then as you're learning all of these things, you're hyper aware of how you're breathing through the day, which is a really weird place to be in because you're breathing all the time. You have to breathe. And so it's like um, if somebody tells you pay attention to how your tongue is as you're talking or as you're going through your day, and now you're hyper aware of what your tongue is doing. It's the same kind of thing. It's just really it's cool that our body can do that without us thinking about it. But bringing some mindfulness into how we're doing it, I think is important. And you mentioned being in a stressful type of situation. I think that part of being able to calm down in those stressful type of situations is you have so much stimulus that's going on around you, and you're focusing on all of these things that are going up in the air or around or whatever it is. If you can bring yourself and center yourself enough to focus on yourself, to breathe, that will take that out just for, 30 seconds, 5 seconds, however long you need. Change the focus onto what you're doing. And then that will hopefully give you a better perspective on what it is that's going on around you, give you an opportunity to reevaluate your options, your choices that you can make moving forward. I found that to be very helpful in stressful type situations. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you can't take, okay, hold on, I got to breathe for 5 minutes before I make this. You can't do that all the time. I understand that. But if you're getting in that stressful type of situation, just be mindful of how you're breathing. As you practice that, then you'll be able to be mindful and be aware of all these things that are up in the air all at the same time, but it'll bring a calmness to that. It'll give those decisions a little bit easier way back and forth of what decision to make.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Make sure you follow us on social media. You can find the podcast at Prestigious Pod.
You can find me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
You can find me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
And if you like our content and would like to subscribe to our email, you can do that via our social media or on the website.
Make sure you also join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions. If you would like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life by me, Chris Bean, you can do that by reaching out on one of my social medias or by emailing the podcast at prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com. Those are the points. Make sure you come back next week for even more points and another great conversation. Until next time, I'm Chris Kent.
And I'm Chris Bean.